Welcome to Spindle and Spoon Homestead. Today I'm going to share with you how I extract indigo pigment from plants in my garden. So indigo pigment comes from the indigo plant, and this past January I started indigo seeds in my living room under my grow lights and transplanted them eventually out into my garden. I used Japanese indigo, but there are some other varieties. And indigo pigment is a deep blue dye that's been used for probably millennia to dye fibers and other things. So you can see the indigo row. I've got 2 rows actually, and the indigo plants grow up to about 2 or 3 feet tall, and then you chop them down to about 10 inches or so that they can grow back. And the tops you're collecting to begin your extraction process. One tip is, if you want to try growing your own indigo, make sure your seeds are from the previous year. They are not older than that. I have heard that indigo seeds must be really fresh in order to germinate. So don't buy older seeds, and if you buy them, be sure you plant them. Don't save them for later, because they will not germinate. That's what I've heard anyway. My girls were excited to help me out, so I'm cutting the plants down and handing the bundles of clippings to them, and they are collecting them in this black trash can that I bought just for this project. One note I also want to say is that I'm sharing a how-to video of how to extract indigo, but I in no way consider myself an expert. I've only been doing this. This is my 3rd time extracting indigo. I did it twice last summer, and this will be my 3rd time. And there are many people from many cultures who are far more experienced experts than I am. I just wanted to share, my little project on my homestead, and I have gotten this information from many experts, and I have had success, but in no way am I like a real expert, if that makes sense. So after you've got all of your clippings in your container, you fill the container with water. My girls were so sweetly and carefully saving every single little spider that managed to crawl its way up through the leaves. They would rescue them. So we filled the container all the way up, and what we're going to do is weigh the leaves down so they stay submerged, and close the lid and just wait for about 24 hours. The time that you have to wait depends on the heat, the temperature outside. So ours took 24 hours, and the next day I took out the weights and we start removing all the plant matter. And a type of fermentation has taken place. You can see the water is this really bright, shimmery aqua color. That's how you know it's ready. It also has a kind of sickly sweet smell. It doesn't smell rotten, but it smells really, really sweet. That's how you know that your fermentation is at the right spot. And it can go faster than 24 hours, or it can take longer. It just depends on the temperature. The next step actually takes quite a while, removing all the plant matter, and I mean all of it, like every little bit. So I start using a strainer to get all the little leaf bits and bits of whatever out of my aqua indigo water. And eventually I started using a window screen, which was pretty effective. And my daughter is using a really fine strainer to get more little bits of plants out. You do need to work quickly after your fermentation is complete to get to the next step, because otherwise it will ferment. I think what it is that it will ferment too much and your pigment will degrade. So you do want to work quickly. You can't like walk off and do the next step later. You got to do it right then. Okay, this is the next step, alkalizing. So I'm adding pickling lime to raise the pH to become an alkalinity level, or a pH level of 10 to 11, thereabouts. So I'm stirring in pickling lime a little bit at a time, testing the pH, stirring in some more, testing the pH. And when you use pickling lime, be sure to wear a mask. The next step is oxidizing. So once you get the correct pH, you want to froth up your indigo liquid so that it gets really bubbly and frothy. This introduces oxygen into the liquid, which helps separate. Actually, I'm not sure what this does. See, I'm not an expert. But what you want to look for is bright blue bubbles forming as you froth things up. I'm using a metal rake to froth it up. You could also use some kind of a pump or a paint stirrer drill bit or something like that. And this process takes time. It's going to take at least, 10 minutes or so, or up to 20 minutes, depending on the efficiency of your frothing. Now you can see that the liquid has changed from aqua to blue. And that is what you want. The next step is to let it settle, because during that process what is happening is that the actual indigo pigment is bonding with the pickling lime powder. And when it bonds with the pickling lime powder, it becomes heavier and it sinks to the bottom of your container. So I've got a little jar of a sample that I can bring inside and watch to see when the indigo pigment has settled on the bottom. The leftover indigo leaves that I pulled out, they make great compost, so be sure you don't throw them away. Alright, it's been, I think at this point it was a day later, or maybe like 12 hours, and I'm going to check it and see if the water is mostly clear and That means the pigment is like a sediment settled onto the bottom. So I'm scooping out a little bit. Honestly, this time it was a little bit blue. I remember now I waited quite a long time. The jar looked a little better, so I just went with it. See how it's clearish on top and you've got this sediment, blue sediment on the bottom. That is your indigo pigment. It's really exciting to me when I get to this stage and see the stuff on the bottom of the jar. So the next step takes quite a while. You want to remove the watery, the clear liquid on top without disturbing the sediment. And I'm also adding vinegar to my bucket and testing the pH because it's very alkaline, this liquid. But if I add a little bit of vinegar, I can test it to get to a neutral pH and then be able to just dump it in my yard without harming anything. So that's what I'm doing here, filling up the bucket, adding some vinegar, and then just dumping it. Then I got my husband to help me with this very heavy trash can full of liquid. We're carefully trying to pour off the top liquid. And I have my really fine micron strainer there, so that if we do accidentally dump some pigment in there, it's okay. The strainer will catch it. This strainer is really nice for indigo, but you can also use a coffee filter or some really tightly woven fabric, like a bandana or something. And the strainer, once I've got all my liquid poured through, I just leave the strainer out to dry this pigment. Right now it's still a little wet, but eventually it dries into a powder that you can crush with a mortar and pestle, and you can store in a jar. And of course the next step is to build an indigo vat, but that's for another video.